So good. Magandang gabi. Good evening, Philippines. This is Ivy from Catalyst Institute, and welcome to another episode of Featured Catalyst. And for tonight's topic, we are going to talk about authentic leadership influence with a very special guest that we have with us. So we are very grateful that he could join us tonight. We have been featuring several experts in the field we've been featuring different catalysts in this field, and I'm very grateful that he agreed to. He said yes when he gave us the invitation to be able to join us tonight. So before I introduce him to everybody, I would like to say a little bit, introduce to you a little bit about what Catalyst Institute is. So Catalyst Institute is committed to empowering leaders and stakeholders in the fields of social services, human resources, and as well as leaders in the civil service fields and education. So our key priorities and our goals is to link leaders and practitioners to research and domain experts, and provide training and design solutions to be able to help them enhance their impact in the wider community. And the way we do that is we link them to research, we train leaders, we foster collaborations, and we design solutions. So we believe and understand that we do not have the monopoly of expertise. People have different expertise in their, depending on what field they are into. And so one of the goals for the Featured Catalyst learning events online is we want to connect people with domain experts in their respective fields so that you could connect with them in the future, consult with them in the future, and be able to tap into their expertise to help you become better at what you do. So for our featured, so before we move forward, a lot of people would ask me, why is it that you named the organization Catalyst Institute? So basically, I base it upon the word catalyst because the word catalyst means an agent that provokes or speeds significant change or action. This is actually a word that originated in chemistry. Which means that, there's a specific chemical reaction that happens that just makes things happen much more quickly. And so when you apply this word to a person, an agent that provokes or speeds significant change or action, it's not just somebody that makes change or happen, but somebody that makes these changes happen swiftly. And I think our featured speaker tonight fits well into this description because to give you a little background, back in 2008 or 2009, I think I sat in one of his workshops. So let me show you there. So that's him and that's me just trying to pay attention to what he's teaching. So back, I think this was mind mapping, power speaking using mind mapping. And I would say it was a worthy but challenging workshop. It was a great skill to learn. And there were plenty of us in that training room, but he made sure that we know what we're doing. So he was kind of like jumping from one table to another, just coaching us properly, checking our work. And here's another photo. As you can see there, it looks like all of us need coffee. But yeah, so the title of the workshop was Power Speaking Using Mind Mapping. But Raju, who was the facilitator, did an expert job, did a great job. But during this period of my life, I was really struggling a lot. I had a lot of ideas about what I want to do in this world, how I want to make a difference. But then I feel trapped and unable to just step out forward and fulfill what I've been wanting to do in my entire life. And then he said something that day and he said something that day that really spoke to my heart and my soul and my spirit. He said, as you become, as you become, you do. And as you do, as you dream, you become. And as you become, you do. And so 2 months after I heard him say that, I resigned from my job, which I do not recommend everybody to do, not unless you have a good plan and support system that's and you have a good support system that's willing to back you up. But 2 months after I heard that word from him, those words from him, I just jumped out of my comfort zone and started doing what I've been doing for the last 11 or 12 years now. And I do realize that I have more catalysts, and I've met more catalysts in my life, in my career, but it was Raju Mandhyan that really created that, just push me. And he was really the catalyst in my life. So without further ado, let me introduce you to him. So Raju Mandhyan is an author, a coach, facilitator, and he's the president emeritus of IAF Philippines and the CEO of Inner Sun Incorporated. And he's been providing a lot of facilitation and training engagements, not only in the Philippines, but as well as in India, in Malaysia, and all over the world. So he is an essential systems thinker and practitioner, and he is certified in Neuro Linguistic Programming, mind mapping, Appreciative Inquiry, and he is the American Management Association's the trainer. He is also a Distinguished Toastmaster and National Champion for Evaluation. So without further ado, Raju Mandhyan, take it away.
Thank you very much, Laili. That was a beautiful testimony to the year 2008. And I want to tell you this in response to the testimony, that not everyone needs an external catalyst like I was to you. Sometimes people have that spark of fire inside of them, and all you have to do is give them space. I think all I did was let you see that space. And the statement that I must have made, I'm sure I made this, it goes like this. It goes, as you dream, so you do. As you do, so you become. So today, there you have become what you have wanted to be 12, 13 years ago. So it was all inside of you. It just kind of came out. It just manifested, and there you are right now. So congratulations for Catalyst, and let me try and add what I've acquired over the last 15, 20 years. And I'm not an expert in this field. I think I'm a student. In my language, we call that shishya, pupil, someone who constantly learns. So that area between how people think and what they say and what kind of change they drive, I think that's the niche that I'd like to cover. And I think that is influence. It's not very far from being a catalyst or a leader. To get me started, let me tell you that about 7 or 8 years ago, I was working with the general manager of a company which all Filipinos know as Alaska. But today it's called Friesland Campina, because a dozen years ago it was bought off. Alaska was bought off by Friesland Campina. And I was working with the then general manager, a Dutch gentleman, and I have his permission to use his name. His name is Jan Wagner. I was sitting with him and working with him, and we were talking about, cross cultures. We were talking about leading, providing feedback, planning, and what have you, and also about leadership. And then in the middle of our conversation, he gives me a story from his life in the Philippines. And he says, Raju, about 6 months ago, we had a batch of production of milk, Alaska condensed milk. And when it came out of production, Raju, it was not worthy of going to the market. It was starved. Something was wrong with it. And he said, the cans that came out of production were worth $3 million in the Philippines. So Alaska, Friesland Campina, and cans worth $3 million. And I said, wow, that's a big amount. And what did you do? He said, well, I called in my production manager, I called in my QC person, and I called in my R&D people. And we sat over this issue, what to do with it. We began to think about what to do with it. We had several ideas, et cetera, et cetera. And at the end of it, after several sessions, he says that my production guy said that if we send back this batch of milk into production line, back into the assembly line, and we open up the cans, reprocess the milk, take away the harmful effects of it and repackage it. So instead of $3 million, we'll end up losing $1 million. We'll save $2 million. And I said, well, what did you do? And he said, well, after the meeting, I talked to the QC, I talked to the R&D, and they said it was possible. There was a 99.9% chance of success. And he said to his team, he said, I don't want to decide today. Let me sleep over this issue. He slept over it, and the next day he goes back to his team, the head of R&D, the head of production, the head of QC, and he says, let's dump the whole batch worth $3 million, and I'll take the blame for it. I'll take the bullets for it. I'll let the buck stop with me.
Mm-hmm.
And these three guys, this gentleman was a Dutch gentleman, and these guys were Asian, Filipinos, Indonesians, and they were flabbergasted. $3 million is a lot of money for anyone.
Sure.
And time passed. 7, 8 months later, these three guys go back to him, and they say, Mr. Wagner, what made you decide to dump that $3 million worth of goods? We are happy that you did. We are pleased that you did. We were actually proud that we didn't send those goods to the market. And there was a burden on our shoulders, and you lifted it, Mr. Wagner. He said that night when I went back home, as I was lying in bed, and I was thinking about the 99.9% chance of success, I asked myself this question. He said this to them. He said, will I let my own son drink from that can, which is 99.9% sure and has been recycled? And a resounding no came from my heart and mind, he said. And so that's why the next day I said, if I can't let my son have that milk, why will I let the rest of the country have that milk? So he pulled that batch out and dumped it. That's the story, amazing story. And it never left my mind. I said, this is what a leader should be. This is how a leader can take stand. This is how a leader should be a stand-up person and become a legacy amongst his own people. Several years later, Ivy, this is funny. I was working with the next general manager of the same company. And this gentleman was not a Dutch person, but he was an African person from one of the states in southern part of Africa. And I was working with him, and we were doing the same stuff, coaching him towards how to adjust and how to lead. And he goes, Raju, I have a huge challenge. I can't kind of manage it. And I said, what's it? He said, there used to be a leader in our company, a former general manager, and I cannot seem to fill his shoes. Every time I do something or say something, everyone in the company comes to me and says, you're not as good as him. This is how that man did it. And I said to him, I can't remember the second person's name, the one from Africa. And he said, by any chance, was his name Jan Wagner? He goes, yeah, that's him. And, it's a beautiful story. It never leaves the desktop of my mind when it comes to leadership, when it comes to influence, when it comes to catalyzing people like it. That to me is authentic leadership. Now, obviously, we know the meaning of authentic. It means honest, sincere, straightforward, candid, frank, right? Somebody who takes the bullet for people and somebody who speaks from the heart and does things in alignment with what he thinks, right? And he's inside, outside the same, very, very congruent. And I looked up, I've been indulging myself into these studies, and the work done by several institutes across the world. Canada has been working with registered nurses, and the research says that if the leader is authentic, and when the leader is authentic, that means he is self-aware, he is congruent, he is aware of what's going on. Not only is he conscious of the content, he's also conscious of the context. And he has a deep desire to serve others and lead others. That's what makes an authentic leader. And this practice, this gnosis that came back, the impact or the influence that leaders such as Jan Wagner or the leaders that are being studied in Canada, the impact goes directly to their psychological capacities. That means their emotional intelligence, their ability to bounce back, to be resilient, and to face crisis and to deal with others. And that impacts their persona, their personality. What does it do to the organization? Increases engagement, increases performance, increases efficiency. And you can look it up. It's all over the net about what's happening in Canada. Last year, in the midst of COVID, Indonesia, a public concern in Indonesia, ran a similar research with 1,050 people. And all of them came back with a similar results as the Canadian researchers. And the mention was that an authentic leader has influence on us directly. He makes us stronger. He makes us a lot more efficient, and he makes us take bullets like they do. And the same impact on organizations. Now, the question usually what most people do is, how do we get there? What are the qualities? What are the enablers of such leadership that is authentic and influential at the same time? From what I've gathered, I want to put across three things, if you're with me. Number one, any leader authentic to his goal, authentic in his performance, has to have clarity, absolute clarity as to who he is. What is his identity? The good book and everyone else, Shakespeare, Socrates, they all mention, know thyself and you'll be able to conquer the world. And that's true. If you're extremely self-aware, you know exactly what your values are, what your belief systems are, what are your likes and dislikes, what turns you on, what turns you off. If you're constantly aware of them and it's on your desktop, you'll come through them, you'll behave through them, you'll not deceive yourself. Absolute clarity of thought, of desires, of intentions, and hopefully of outcomes too. And I want to share an example in the book, Primal Leadership of Daniel Goleman, which was written a good 20 years ago. And I'm a fan of that book. Most of the world is fan to emotional intelligence. I am a fan of primal leadership. In that book, there's a story about the research done with a mother who gave birth to twin boys. And the researcher said, let's watch what creates people, what builds people. Is it nature or nurture? And they were kind of around this woman who gave birth. And in the story, when these two kids, these two boys, are brought to the mother, and as she regards them, as she looks at them, a thought goes through her mind. As she looks at the guy on the left, she thinks, this guy here on the left is like my husband. Therefore, all the negative attitudes and attributes of my husband must be part of him. Then she looks at the twin on the other side and she goes, this guy, he looks like me. And even though they were identical twins, that's the thought that goes through her head. Now, over the years, the researchers follow this mom, they follow the kids. The one on the left and the one on the right both get the same superficial treatment. That means same school, same clothes, same friends, same toys, and same clubs. Everything's the same. But just that little sliver of a thought in the mother's mind at the very beginning of their life has a major impact on them. The guy on the left turns out to be a troublesome kid, has trouble in school, has trouble in society, has trouble growing up, has trouble adapting to the norms of society. The one on the right side, the one that seemingly looked like the mother herself, turns out to be a good kid, gets A grades, performs well, doesn't fight with anyone, and grows up to be a great citizen of the world, the country. Point being that if your clarity, if your sense of self-awareness and the thoughts that if they go wrong, even to that little minor effect, they can have a major impact on all your projects, on all your processes, on everything that you want to change. That means if you don't have hope, if you don't have trust, if you dislike it at the start, and you don't tell anyone and you deceive yourself, you are being unclear. You are being unauthentic to yourself. So the number one thing for good leaders is clarity, absolute clarity. Personally, I spend time sitting out alone sometimes when I get a chance, meditating, think about what is it that I want? Who am I? I never get the right answer, but the struggle itself helps me cleanse myself. That's number one. Number two, once you have that raw material about what is it that you want, what is it that you want to create, and who you are, and what your belief systems are, the second thing that is required is creativity. That means a leader's ability to see the world around him and to recognize that he doesn't stand alone. His visions are not the only visions in the world. His hopes are not the only hopes in the world. There are millions of others who have their own visions, their own hopes, their own ambitions, their own aspirations. And he, as a leader, or she, as a leader, has to work through this crowd of people who are on their own journeys. Thus, you need creativity of approach. You need creativity of strategy. You need to decide, find a way that is different, find a solution that's different every single time. Don't jump to conclusions. Don't take the first thing that comes to you. Sit through it, think through it, give it time and effort, and try to make it different. Cheaper, better, faster, more efficient, more innovative, whatever you want to name it. But you must make an effort to be different constantly. It's very, very important. An example of creativity in leadership. In the year 2010, a bunch of kids in Ateneo wanted to do their research on the Dumagats of the Philippines. Now, you probably know what the Dumagats are, and your Filipino audiences know what Dumagats are. They're a bunch of indigenous people that live in the Sierra Madre, the southeastern part of Metro Manila, amongst those hills. And these are people who live by the river, of the river, for the river. They don't leave those riverbeds to come to the city, even if they are only 30 to 40 miles far away from the city. And for decades, researchers and social workers like yourself try to draw them into mainstream society, but the Dumagats refuse. Even till now, there are issues happening about building dams and civilizing that neighborhood. They just refuse. In 2010, 3 kids from Ateneo, they say, we go work on the Dumagats and we'll gather data on them and see if we can impact them, see if we can drive some change to them. And their professor said, just don't bother, hundreds of people before you have failed, you're not going to pick up any data from them. It's not going to work. But the kids were adamant. No. So this is what the kids did. Instead of doing a paper and pencil research on them, doing a survey or whatever, they bought half a dozen ordinary cameras, Kodak, those click and throw cameras. And they went to the hills of the Sierra Madre and they found a tribe. And they said, we are from Ateneo and we are students. We do not intend to open you up like, how a lab scientist opens up a frog. No, here's what we want to do. We'll give you these cameras. We'll teach you how to shoot them. And we'll come back every week and take those negatives and process them for you. Nothing else besides that. The Dumagats agreed. And so they left their cameras. Next week, they go back, they pick up the negatives, process the pictures. Next week, they go back, give the pictures, swap the films. And this goes on for days and weeks and weeks. At the end of about 5 or 6 weeks, the Dumagats begin to wait for these kids. They begin to wait for the pictures that are coming towards them. When the kids turn up, they are invited into their families, they're made to eat the food, and they get to hear stories about this Lolo or that Pamangkin or that guy there and how they live on the trees and how they live on the river, etc. And through this process of chatting, conversing with the Dumagats, obviously the kids are picking up data, but they still don't have permission to capture that data. At the end of about 3 months, the Dumagat say, would you please go and tell our stories to the people of Metro Manila, the civilized world? And the kids were thankful and they wrote their thesis paper. And in the year 2010, that thesis was the #1 thesis in Ateneo. And it also won the second best thesis in all of Asia in Singapore. You can look for it. It's called Voice and Visibility, a Dumagat story, and it's a beautiful research point that if you want to drive change, if you want to impact people, if you want to catalyze people, you need to go down at the roots of that crucible. You need to understand where they're coming from, what is it that you want to change, and your approaches need to be different. You just can't keep knocking on the door. You have to make up different openings. You need to come from the window or any other access if you want to create. But your intentions need to be authentic. They need to be empowering to the subject matter. It's only when they understand that the change you're wanting to drive, that's the time they respond to you. That's a
I really
simple
like
way.
your point. I really
Sorry?
like your point about. I really like your point. I'm sorry if I have to jump in, but I really like your point about, you know, understanding people,
Yeah.
going to their level. There's a thing which we call as, so whenever we approach our programs, we have a policy on meeting people where they are as a way to, one of the steps that if you want to make change, you have to meet people where they are. I mean, back to your point of like, if you are a leader and if you want to impact change, you cannot assume people to rise above your level, although that's one direction that you want them to go, right? But first and foremost, just meet them where you are. A very important point that you just reminded me of, Raju.
Don't let
Excellent.
them come to you. You go to them. You know? So when I work with leaders, they talk about calling that executive in, that graphic artist, the technician, come on inside my room. I want to talk to you. And that's a no-no policy. Even though it's an open door policy, you are the leader, stand up, walk to that table and, meet them at their ground, meet them at a neutral level. So it's true. There's another book which really sparked up my interest in authentic leadership. And that book is called Leadership and Self-Deception. Within that, there's a case study of a drug addict girl who's brought by her parents to this rehabilitation center, and she refuses to go in. And as soon as she gets down from the car, she begins to run on the highway barefoot. And the father and mother can't do anything, but the attendants of that rehabilitation center, the nurses, etc., they begin to chase the girl. The girl's running barefoot. And these nurses, etc., they notice that she's running barefoot. Her feet are beginning to bleed. They remove their shoes and chase her barefoot. Their feet begin to bleed. That's the time the girl turns around, looks at them, and she realizes that they're bleeding for me. She stops. She turns around. That's what is meeting people at where they are. It's an amazing thing. And in your country and my country, we call that being malasakit.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. No, it's really deep compassion, strong compassion. So there you go. Creativity of your approach, and of course, meeting them at their level. The last one. So the first one is about a clear vision, really. It's clarity throughout. The second one is about strategy and approach. The third one is about action, conscientious action. That means in the journey of life, when we are changing people, when we are driving change people, amongst people, and there are other people, there are other stakeholders, there are other systems at play. And you as a leader, sometimes in your excitement, in your enthusiasm to change, may do wrong things. And it's during execution, it's during taking action that you must use the same measures that you use during visualizing your future, visualizing a good future for everyone else. Same measures. Your measures should not change. They should become flawless. There should be integrity between what you clearly see and what you're clearly acting upon every single day. Like Mr. Jan Wagner. Absolutely. I mean, he walked his talk even before he said a word, right? And that's amazing. So conscientious action. That's important, of action with people and planning and designing, what have you. It must be true. It must be true to what you plan, what you think, inside and out. Very, very congruent. So these to me are three enablers of authentic leadership, Ivy. And in the work I do, not just with others, but with myself, someday the standards that I talk about, I hope to achieve them. Someday I hope to bring other people along. What is my method? What is my approach? The approach in practice is a combination of seeing the psychosis of a person. How are we made up? We are made up of external behavior. We are made up of our attitude. We are made up of our strong core beliefs. That's what we are. You know, what we do, how we behave, and what we really truly believe in. And that makes us up. I mean, Raju, the age I am of, I've collected values, I've collected habits, I've collected practice over the last 50, 60 years, and that's who I am. That's where my identity is, my core values, that's where it is. So that's the first step, recognizing how a person is made up, how individuals are made up. And even organizations are made up in a similar way. They're just a larger number of people. That's the first aspect. The second aspect of driving change, first is getting down to the value and core belief level. The second one is recognizing that your stakeholders, all of them need to climb Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That means in your presence, in your initiative, they must first feel safe, which we just discussed, right? They must feel belong to, right? They must have their emotional needs fulfilled. And then beyond that, they must wanna self-actualize. Whatever their dreams and aspirations are, that's where they need to go. So the journey that a leader must undertake is first to dive deep within himself, dive deep within his stakeholders, understand where they're coming from, and then take them up, dive deep and take them forward to where they want to go. And authentic leadership or authentic leadership influence is no different from transformative leadership. Every leader's job is to drive change and take people from where they are to a much better place. That's the truth. That's the model. And I'm working at it. I intend to polish it a lot more and give it frameworks that will be very practical. Currently, I use what you use. I saw on your website you use motivational interviewing. And my format is the same. I use Appreciative Inquiry. And there are 5 stages to it. And each of the stage is a process of questioning. The first one is superficial questioning, understanding the dynamics of their surroundings, like what's happening on the surface. Number 2 is understanding what is it that they want, making them reflect. The first is research about them. The second one is reflective questioning. The other one is assessing their strengths, like what is it possible by them. So if they have a certain amount of aspirations and visions, you need to make assessments. You need to assess if they have the capacities for it. Do they have the psychological capacity for it? Do they have the physical capacity for it? Do they have external resources to take them to where they want? You have moved from Cebu to St. Louis, Missouri, right? You had to gather resources back then, right? Took you a while. But a lot of them were within you. The intention to be there, the intention to change. That was a powerful resource. Other things like a plane ticket or a room in St. Louis, Missouri came along, So that's the journey. So the first level of questioning that I take people through, and I also coach my leaders to take people through, is research, reflection, assessment of strengths, and then kind of positioning them into where they want to go. It's like making them realize what is possible. So their hopes, their aspirations kind of solidify. And the last level of questioning is kind of reaffirming everything. Like, is this correct? Is this what you want? And when you get a resounding yes from your clients, that's the time change is assured and guaranteed. Throughout the journey, Jan Wagner the students, right, or anyone, whoever drove change, usually most leaders, their focus is not on themselves. It is outside of them. Though they know the attention is inside, but the focus to create change is outside. Anytime a leader moves to becoming self-focused and self-serving, everything around him, every change that he's attempting to drive comes crashing down. So the formula for authentic influence is clarity, creativity, conscientiousness. It could be compassion, courage, what have you. But the numerator, IV, is self-focus. So the larger the numerator becomes, the lesser your impact is on everything else. The lesser of a catalyst you become. That is authentic leadership to me, Ivy. And I hope this helps you, helps the people watching this little talk that I'm sharing. And if you want to ask me questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Yeah, sure. Thank you for sharing those three key important points. So it's clarity. These are three enablers of authentic leadership. So you have to have clarity, creativity, and conscientiousness. Conscientiousness, that's correct, right? It's very interesting. One point that you mentioned was, you know, when we often have this open door policy, and then we automatically assume that people will go to you because you establish a certain policy, but it's not quite true, especially for Filipinos. Like they always have that, we call it like power. There's always that power structure that exists.
Power distant hierarchy. And we have inhibitions, we have timidness, we call it here.
And so even though you explicitly mention, even if you explicitly say, okay, we're an open door policy, you can come to me at any time, but it does not happen. And it's not just because, and it's a cultural thing. So my question is, how would you encourage leaders to break down that, you know, inhibition and really create that sense of safety so that people will be free to come to them at any time and they feel safe to be what they are and who they are in your presence as a leader?
Humility, humor, a sense of humanity, no? All three, all of them starting with HU. And humility is not something that they can act out. We Filipinos here in this part of the world, we are very intuitive. You know, every time I talk to a bunch of Filipinos and they're talking about a leader or a person from a different culture, the questions they have amongst each other is from one colleague to another, and they go, "Mabait ba siya?" I mean, it's there all over. The first thing they go, "Mabait ba siya?" And of course, mabait means, is he a nice person? And what makes a person nice? Lack of pride, lack of self-consciousness, lack of self-focus, you know, a humility, a desire to serve, a good intention to serve, and a lightness about his own persona. You know, if you're like high and mighty and arrogant and yabang, nobody's going to walk up to you. You may not just open the doors, you may break down the walls, but people are not approaching you because there are so many silos you've built around you. There's so many protections you have. Lack of self-awareness is one, because if you're arrogant, you don't know who you are. Absolutely right. So there's a lot of pretensions around you. There's a lot of deception around you, and people sense that all the time. In fact, in every conversation we have with people, when we sit across people, no matter what their levels are, what their power distances are, we're always assessing people for their intentions. What is the core of this person? What does he value? What does she value? And whether it's a powerful leader in a high chair or a small person looking up at another person, both of them are constantly assessing themselves. And I have to tell you, people always will figure you out. You cannot fool them for a long time. You can fool them once, twice, but you cannot fool them forever. And the best strategy for that is open up from the get-go level. Open up to yourself first. Tell yourself, who are you? Even if there's a slight bias within your thinking processes, even if you're warped, even if you have lots of dislikes, but as long as you become aware and conscious and accept them, your flaws, they will go away. People will accept you with your flaws. If you are reactive, if you're obsessive, compulsive, etc., accept that, and laugh about it, and then people will come to you, and that thing will wash away. That's what it is. Honestly, it's humility, humor, humanity, a sense of humaneness. Kapwa Tao, it must become a part of you.
Mhm.
You can't put it on. It's not a shirt that today I'll be nice. No, you got to be nice to the core of your bone, to your bone marrow, in your blood and your bone. You need to be that kind of a person. It's not easy, Ivy. It is definitely not easy. It's a long journey. Several
For
years
sure.
ago, I was sitting with my friend Francis Combe in Jack Canfield seminar. And he turned around to me and he goes, Raju, what are you up to these days? And this is about 15 years ago, maybe before I met you. And I go, I'm in the process of cleansing myself. It's been 15 long years. I'm not done cleansing myself. Make sense?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Can you speak more about how can one cleanse himself or himself as a pathway to becoming an authentic leader? Like, what were the steps that you took? What were the steps that you took?
Well, reflection,
Mm-hmm.
lots of reflection, okay? Not just once, reflecting with another, right? Coaches, counsels, friends. I mean, the closer the person to you, then their reflections of you are a little bit biased, So finding an objective person and really being open to feedback. It hurts, really.
Mm-hmm.
But when you learn to tell yourself that this is hurting, but there may be a little iota of truth in what she says about me. I could be that kind of person. And it's not an easy journey. We all go through conflict every single day, every 1 week, we go through conflict. Just last week, I was at a gas station in Laguna and I got down from my car. I had my mask on, and a girl comes up and she goes, how much? I said, okay, fill the tank. And she goes, is it automatic? Will it shut off by itself? And I said, no, it's broken. The system's broken. Keep an eye on it. Make sure that it doesn't flow out. And I had a puppy dog with me, and I walked the puppy dog to fetch her a glass of water. When I come back, there was a puddle of gas under my car, like a few liters had spilled out. And the girl attendant, she was still pouring it in and looking up into the sky. And I screamed at her. I said, what are you doing? And then she goes, oh. And then she stopped it. And I said, didn't I tell you to watch this? And she goes, well, I didn't see it. I said, of course you were looking up. So how could you see it? And then she began to try to wash it away with soapy water. And I said, no, I need the refund on that 5 liters that you spilled for me. And then the manager comes in and she says, oh, sorry, sir, etc. And then it struck me. I said, what am I doing, Raju? Why am I losing my cool over someone's flaw? Someone as humble and as simple as a gas attendant, What does it do to me? What does it say about me, right? It's worth $5, right? Did I have to lose my cool at another person because of $5? And then it struck me and I stopped myself. So point being that the process of cleansing is not a one-time process. You got to catch yourself doing such things every now and then, getting annoyed. Somebody who pushes the wrong buttons, you need to stop yourself and find out what is it about the action, about them, that is so terrible, or is it something about you, right? So it's really how you view it, how objective you can get to it, and what your perspective is. To change your perspective often, and so it's a lifetime journey. Reflection, watching yourself, correcting yourself, and then processing it. Now, this little incident with the gas attendant is not a huge one. But it reflects upon me. I could have just stood quietly, moved the car away, and talked about it. But no, I lost my cool. I said, you're looking at the sky. So I'm sorry. If the girl hears this, I hope she hears my apologies. So that's how it is. That's how it is, honestly.
Yeah, that can be very challenging because sometimes we leaders try to maintain our sense of power and position. And
Yes.
I know that for some, looking at themselves or assessing their faults can really be very difficult because it could also mean like making themselves vulnerable and giving their power away. Do you mind speaking about that?
Yes, you're absolutely. It's giving your power away. It's recognizing that you are absolutely no different. And whatever your flaws are shall be open. You can be transparent. And over a longer period of time, Ivy, what happens is that you begin to realize that you are becoming a changed person. It takes time. And then you begin to smile and then you begin to appreciate yourself. Then you look yourself in the mirror and you don't feel terrible. If incidents like that accumulate, like the one with the gas attendant, and you do not correct yourself, if you do not apologize, if you don't feel sorry for it, you can't look at yourself in the mirror. And over time, in my case, I remember this 20, 25 years ago, I used to look at my face and I was a hardcore business person, Ivy. And I used to say, what are you doing? I mean, all right, it was about this much, it was about that. Where's this going to go in the long run? And it took so much time. Today, obviously, I'm not a hardcore business person, right? And my status or my presence in the world is of a lighter one. But every time I look at myself, I feel thrilled. I said, okay, I like the guy in the mirror. You know what it means? I like the guy in the mirror. I like him much more than I did 20 years ago. Yeah.
Exactly. So I have somebody sent us a question during the registration, and one of the question is how can a leader raise up a catalyst from the grassroots? So I think this person works with a nonprofit organization, and she goes into the field.
Right. How do you discover potential and how do you uncover potential? How do you groom that person? No? Self-awareness first is you begin to learn to understand your own strengths and weaknesses. No? Over time, it begins to kind of rub off on people around you. You begin to notice people very quickly. You know, a person who is strong, confident, brave, a stand-up person, you begin to notice that very, very fast. You know? Back in the day, if I met someone, it would take me several days and weeks to kind of figure out who they were. Now I glance at them, how they move their eyes, how they respond, you know, and how they accept their flaws and how they stand committed and their perception of you. And you can begin to kind of see strengths, right? In their talk, in their behavior, in what they profess about themselves. And then it's going back to that process of interviewing. That means digging into their values. And if you discover nuggets of wisdom, nuggets of strength, then you capture them and you kind of bring them to the fore. And once you see that, then it's a matter of polishing it, giving them chances, giving them opportunities, giving them creative space to grow and fail and be flawed. But if you have recognized strengths, you have to give it time. You can't change a human being overnight. You can't change a culture overnight. You know, Drucker said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." Same thing with individuals. If they are habituated to certain things, you can't change it in a jiffy. But if you see potential, you need to be patient with that. You know Tony Melotto of Gawat Kalinga, and about the same time when I was with what's his name, Jack Canfield, I was hosting an event for Tony, and I got a private moment with him, and I said, Tony, there's so much money coming into your organization. It's a social organization. There's so many people joining up. I mean, the money's pouring in, the people are pouring in. How do you prevent fraud and forgery and people fighting amongst themselves. They're brand new people. And then he paused. He looked at me and he goes, trust. I said, what do you mean trust? He said, at the get-go level, when a person comes to me and he says, Tony, I want to work for you, I don't check his background. I don't kind of dig into his malicious intentions. I take him for his word and I let him see it, I let him feel it, and they rise up to meet me. And that's how this organization has become the huge organization it has. It's a trust, absolute trust. So likewise, if you feel that there is potential and strength, give it space, give it trust, give it an opportunity to fail, give it creative space, and it will come. It takes time.
And yeah, I like what you said about giving them time, the opportunity to fail. So for leaders right now, especially those that are production driven,
Yeah.
how do you suggest they create that balance between allowing that time for people to develop, and at the same time making sure that they perform at their jobs?
Right. So let me try that. I think I did mention try creative approaches, correct? And we're talking about influencing change, correct? With an individual or amongst a group, correct? And we're also talking about not pushing too hard, correct? We are talking about being subtle, etc. Instead of directly wanting to influence the entity, a good leader will take a helicopter view. In my opinion, anytime I want to change something, I want to build something new, I think of the structure. Will the structure I first build, is my structure good enough for people to come in? Is it stable enough for them to stand upon it? Is it stable enough for them to lean upon it? Is it flaw-proof? Once I have a good structure, that means a good organizational design, that's a structure. Then the systems, how the process will flow from department A to department B till it's out of us, until we serve the clients. Are the processes smooth? Are my systems working? Are there checks and balances that I can control? If I put those in, and then I send in these people with potential and let them fail within those parameters, then they grow. So a good leader will think big picture. This is the creative approach. You just can't go and say, hey, I need you to change. So today I work with global corporations in the Philippines, and many of them come with a very solid structure, a very good organizational design, systems too. Now, for these people with great structures and great systems, I work on their skills with people. I said, look, it's a different culture, it's a different ballgame, it's a different approach. So go sensitive, go subtle, go smooth, become humane. And it's a little bit of a task, but they get it, they get the point. So the answer to your question is start with structures, start with systems, discover potentials, and then unleash it. Slowly, let it find its own ground. I hope this is making sense to you, Ivy, because
It's all making sense.
I don't see an audience and it's just you and I, but I'm fine with it. I hope there is an audience on your live stream.
Yeah, so yeah, for sure, this is, it completely makes sense. And because there seems for sure that because you're talking about, based on what you've been sharing, great points that you've been sharing, you're talking about like putting emphasis on the humanity of the person.
Yeah.
As a leader, as one of the most important element or attribute or character of what a catalyst should be, but at the same time, having that balance between
the
showing that humanity, but at the same time, like the structure that exists for this change to happen.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So you need to give them the tools. Look, you can't have them become productive without offering the tools and the space. Not with their bare hands. They can't do that. Obviously, there's a good intention, there's potential, there's passion, but it needs other resources too. So as a leader, you need to think big picture.
So we have some watchers, some people watching us. I was wondering if they would like to ask questions too. All right, so we have a question here. And it says, what do you do when you feel that you don't feel like a leader anymore?
Oh, ouch, 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 ouch. I'm sorry to hear that, I think it's your definition of a leader. I have no idea who you are. I don't see you, but it's your definition of a leader. That means, do you consider leadership a burden? Do you consider it a challenge? Do you consider it to be a job? Regardless of what we do, regardless of what we do, regardless of the fact that we may have people to lead or not, there is leadership potential in each one of us. We are all potential leaders. And a turn of leadership, a twist, can take 10 seconds, 15 seconds. You going from being an ordinary human being to being a superhuman being can take 15 seconds, Miss or Sir, the one who asked this question. It can happen on the street. You can see an old lady struggling to cross the road and you go, what? No one's there. And you step up for it, right? You've taken leadership action. Same thing with anything else we do, whether we are talking to people or whether we are working with a group. You don't really have to be in a position. You don't have to consider a burden because your values will drive you. And if something is holding you back today, then you need to check the things that you may have done or are doing or involved with, or maybe if you're with an organization and you don't have alignment with their values, then you need to reconsider your partnership with them. Mm-hmm. That comes up often. Every time a leader says, I'm not happy in my position. I'm not happy with what I'm doing. Get clarity on your own values. Get clarity on the values of the organization and see if there's a match. If there's a mismatch, if there's a minor one, make adjustments. Otherwise try and change them. But if there are major ones, then it's time to probably part. In my case, if I have 50 chances to part, I'll stop myself 49 times. 7 times 7, I will stop myself. But if it goes beyond that, then I will part ways. It's a big world out there, right? So think about that. I really don't know your case, but I'm just assuming that that's where the question came from. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that's a question from one of the audience, so I'm kind of thinking about where that question is coming from. So maybe the person is placed in a formal leadership position, but actually does not get the kind of support and empowerment from the organization to enable the person to be a leader and be a catalyst wherever he is or she is.
Yeah.
So really great point of having that.
I swear to you, that happens all the time. I've been asked that question hundreds of times. What if I'm not happy? What if my boss doesn't agree? What if people don't follow me? It's a question of clash of values. 2 weeks ago, I wrote an article on LinkedIn and I said from identity to intentions, which is the same as knowing yourself and knowing what you want and journeying the distance. Then a friend of mine from Canada, professor of OD, and he goes, Raju, identity, it means values. And I go, yes, David, of course I mean that, identity, who you are is what your values are. So check those, And if you want to know what values are, what is it that you like? What is it that turns you on? Whether it be an abstract thing or a tangible thing, what is it that turns you on? What do you pay attention to all the time? What are your hopes and dreams? Is it your kids, your family, your faith? Is it your profession? You will know what's on the top of your mind and in the depths of your hearts. Those are your values. That's who you are.
Awesome.
I hope that helps.
I wish that a lot of people can watch us right now, but this will be available on the Catalyst page on YouTube and on LinkedIn. I really hope that people can listen to this presentation because like this is gold. I wish I have listened to this talk many years ago. It would have like made my progression towards towards my leadership role a lot easier. I was wondering if you could if there was a way for us to, people that will be watching, if there was a way for us to attend your workshops, get coaching from you, and develop this kind of, to have these enablers of authentic leadership. Can you please talk more about it?
It's a little bit of plugging time. Forgive me for that.
Yeah.
Number one is, here's what I'll do. I have a simple PowerPoint on this subject matter that I spoke to you about. I just didn't want to, bother myself with the PowerPoint because it gets in the way of this online conversation. It's about 20 slides, and I'll send it to you, and you can blend it with this conversation or attach it. And it goes through that process of what I told you about clarity, creativity, and conscientiousness, but bullet points. Starting, I think, July first week until the end of September, I'm doing about 12 webinars. And the program that we're running, me and my partners, it's called Flame. That's why you see that blue flame behind me. It's the logo of that program. It's an leadership development program, and we start with self-mastery. Then we go through creative thinking and systems thinking and communication skills, etc., until we come down to technical stuff like data management or contract management. So it's about 12 webinars that we'll be putting out starting July. In fact, I think the marketing should get started in a few weeks. So the program is called Flame, Foundations of Leadership and Management Excellence, Flame. That's that little picture behind me. And you can look me up, and I don't think they're very pricey. It's a very minimal cost nowadays, because of everything being online, and it's in partnership with the Philippines Computer Society. So I'll give you that link, Ivy, and you can look it up. In fact, you can just go to one of my websites and it'll be there.
Okay. Yeah. So go to, for our audience right now, you can go to
innersun.com.
Innersun.com.
Or innersuninc.com. My apologies. Innersuninc.com. Oh, if they Google Innersun, it'll pop up.
Okay. So yeah. Well, again, Raju, thank you so much. I mean, you've shared the stage with Jack Canfield and Tony Melotto and Francis Kong, and who am I? Thank you so much.
You're Llena. You are.
This is super humbling,
You're fabulous, By the way, I want to make a confession. Everything I told you in the last 1 hour, it can be contained in as you dream, so you do. As you do, so you become. So if in your heart, if you dream well, you will do well. And when you do well, you will become good. If you dream good for others, you will do the right things and you will become their leader. It's a simple process. It is really clarity of your thought. It is about creativity of your approach, and it is about conscientiousness of your action. Thoughts, words, and action. That's what life is all about.
Thoughts, words, and action. Amazing. Well, ladies and gentlemen, feel free if you want to join any of Raju's webinars, and I would encourage you to do so. This is just an amazing, this is only like an hour, but I've gained a lot. There's so much to memorize: clarity, creativity, conscientiousness, 3 R's: humility, humanity, and humility, humor, and humanity. Those are great things to incorporate into our leadership approaches in order for us to become catalyst of change wherever we are. So Raju, thank you so much for gracing us with your time and your supreme knowledge and expertise in the area of authentic leadership. Thank you so much.
Not expertise, my studies. Thank you very much, Ivy.
Thank you.
And good luck with Catalyst, and God bless you.
Thank you. God bless you too. Bye.